Bree Matthews for the record and the Executive Director at the Office of Broadband Development.
Hello, my name is Ariel Gannon. I am the Government Relations Director at D.
All right, with that, we'll start our presentation. And as always, I want this to be a learning opportunity. So if you have questions during the presentation, feel free to ask. Otherwise, happy to take them at the end as well. So, and Darielle will be helping me with the slides. So thank you once again for having me here to share the incredible work that our office has done over the past year. And we'll just get into it. So, as a reminder, the Office of Broadband Policy Framework is as such. We do have statutory goals, so remember the 100 by 20 by 2026 is our next sort of goal that we're going after here. We do have the Office of Broadband, and we do have the Governor's Task Force on Broadband, of both which our office does also support the task force. We have our mapping program and all of our data, which has been something that the office has done since 2028, before even established, but as a state. And that is all available on our website. And those maps do get updated twice a year. And then finally, we have a lot of tools in our tool belt as far as infrastructure grant programs and now our digital equity work. So here's the team. For those of you who've been around broadband for a long time, you probably remember there was maybe one or two or maybe three. With all of the additional resources, both federally and state, we have been able to grow our team. And what I do like most about this slide is the fact that you can see by those dots, those are the geographical locations of which members of my team are located. So they live and work in communities across the state and really understand the work that we're doing and the impact we're doing. And I'll just put a quick plug. Mine is down in Southeast Winona County, so woo! All right. So why are we still here? We've been doing this a long time. So as I mentioned, our maps are updated in November as well as in the spring, but these most recent maps were of November 2023. I did also show that last year in 2022, just so that you can understand how are we doing. So I do really believe these numbers of access are going down because of the hard work of all of you and the hard work of our providers and the communities across the state. But we still know there's a great need, and those are also the most expensive and hardest places to serve. And so just be understanding of that. So I know the map is small, but you can see sort of where are the locations in Minnesota that are still not getting that speed of our speed goals of 100 by 20. Oh, yes, it's very hard to see on there. So the red is still the unserved areas that do not have the 25.3, and then it goes into the green, I believe, of the 100 by 20, and then the other areas are served. All right, so I don't want to spend a lot of time on this because I'll be talking about a lot of this during the rest of my presentation, but I do want to highlight a few things in here. So our annual report is posted online every year, and so I would encourage you to take some time and just even review some of the highlights because these are just a few of them. But I do want to at least highlight that the Office of Broadband does take phone calls, and we do phone calls from residents and businesses across the state at any time and help them understand what providers they have available, if they're unserved, if they should connect with a provider, if they should apply for line extension program, all those things. So customer service is really a part of the work we do every day. The other thing I just want to touch base on is that we are actively working with our tribal communities and are doing consultations with them as much as we are able to as well. I'll leave it at that. All right, so as a reminder, last year's legislative session was another historic movement for Office of Broadband and the work you all have done with $100 million in the biennial. So thank you again for all of your support and the work that you have done to continue to move our goals forward. With that, each year is $50 million, and of that, directed to do $30 million in our border-to-border, our traditional grant program, and $20 million in the low population program. The only technical change that was made was from $5 million to $10 million on a maximum grant. All right, so this slide is really good as a reflection to where we have been. And I really want you also to focus. Sometimes we see numbers, we see match dollars, but what is really great about it is looking at the number of locations that have been served through the last grant rounds that we have done. And that's over 100,000 folks, businesses, individuals, homes across the state that we have been able to give broadband access to. So really a huge impact. And then also knowing, not including this additional $100 million, we have awarded over $237 million in grants over the course of those years. All right, so where are we now? We currently are going through and ranking and making ready to award grant round 9. And so again, that's 50 million, of which 30 million will be in border to border, and 20 million in low population. What I can tell you is that we did receive 38 applications in our traditional border to border for over $65 million. And again, we have 30 million available. With our low population program, we had 31 applicants and over $85 million in applications. So again, oversubscribed greatly. Grant round 10. So we have that 50 million that we hope to launch soon after we make the grant round 9 awards. One of the reasons is because with the BEAD dollars, the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment, which I will share a little more and you're probably all familiar with, we really need to know what dollars, spend all our dollars and know the final locations we need to serve with the federal dollars. In order to do that, we need to spend all of our state dollars. So we're hoping to make official awards on those applications soon after the July 1st, so we'll be in the next biennium as directed by the legislature. All right, the line extension program. So during the 2022 legislative session, we were able to create the line extension connection program. And really this awards grants to extend the existing broadband infrastructure to the actual home. So often you see that maybe where I live, the line goes across the street, didn't actually come to my home. And this really helps to bridge the barrier of getting that deployment and the cost to access up to the door. And we did use capital projects dollars on that, and we have 15 million available. These line extension applications are self-applied, so residents and businesses can go on the website and register for the program. So we did make one award so far, and we're in the process of finalizing the next round of winning bids per se. And with that first round, we had over 2,356 addresses in our portal. And with that, over $4.3 million in awards were made. And the average, I think some really good data for all of you to be aware of is the average cost for those locations was almost $9,000. So we're seeing that cost a little more, and that is an average. So there were some that were more and some that were less. I think it's also really important to note that our providers are matching dollars. This isn't 100%. They are also contributing to the cost to make sure that these deployments happen, and it has been a really great partnership. So of those, we were able to award 843 homes and businesses, and we already have, I believe, 3 that are close to completion, which doesn't sound like a lot, but that is directly getting broadband to people's homes. Funding rounds will continue until those dollar amounts are exhausted, and we again hope to have the next round coming very soon. All right, we'll move into the federal dollars, and as a reminder, with the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, Internet for All was created, and the Office of Broadband and other states and territories, each state, are getting a certain dollar amount to help deploy broadband to all the unserved locations and get Internet for All. There are 2 programs. One is the BEAD program, again, the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment, so the infrastructure program. And then there's also the digital equity funding. Our dollar amount in this, you can go to the next slide, was based on a formula, and those formulas were based on the FCC maps at the time that the formulas were directed. We do know that those maps are not 100%. And so I will just share a little bit more in a few minutes, but just remember that we will work on getting those maps as correct and as accurate as we can. So back to the bead itself, so 652 million about, and we are directed to use that on three, there's actually more priorities, but in Minnesota, we have three priorities we're really focusing on because of the dollar amount. One is our priority one is to get to all unserved locations, and by definition from NTIA, that is 25 by 3. After we can show that we can get to all those locations, then we can move on to the underserved, which is the 100 by 20, and then from there we can go into community anchor institutions. Again, I talked a little bit about the federal FCC map. So on this slide, the red areas are areas that they have indicated that they would be under priority 1 or the 25-3 and would need to be served. And again, then with the next, the orange locations are the underserved, and the green would be areas that already have reliable internet. Obviously, there's pockets when you zoom into the slide, it's more granular and more detailed, but just to sort of give you a snapshot of where Minnesota is as a whole. The Office of Broadband, we have holistically defined, historically defined our broadband as wire service, though we are technology agnostic. But with NTIA's dollars, it's either wired service or licensed fixed wireless. So still working on some of those in partnership with NTIA on how that defines. And then the last and really important thing that I want to flag on this screen is the challenge process. So once our volume 1 is approved, and we had 2 volumes, they've both been submitted, this is the initial plan, we can go into a challenge process. And what that allows us to do is capture all the locations that are still unserved or are already served or could be a shed in the middle of the field that will never need to be served, so should be taken off the map. So it's our opportunity as a state to really finalize those maps to have a snap in time. The only people or organizations that can challenge during this process is our internet service providers, nonprofits, and local units of government. So an individual can't necessarily do a challenge. They can do a challenge, but then it goes in under the blanket of all of those locations or all of those organizations. So we've been trying to have conversations with our associations, really narrow down how we get the word out. Speed checks are going to be a little complicated for folks because not everybody is going to be able to do the 3 speed checks at the same time to make sure that they have challenged that location. So the partnerships that we are working on with the nonprofits, ISPs, and local units of government will be really important to make sure we're capturing all the unserved locations. And again, taking off those that will not be served, keeping in mind there is no additional funds available for more locations. We still have to stay within the confines of the dollar amount we receive from the federal dollars. Some of the things that we have identified as far as challenges to deployment with BEAD are as follows, and the one that probably when I'm talking to colleagues across the nation that gets them a lot of time is weather. Now this year may not have been as much of an issue, but really we do have less time throughout the year to deploy infrastructure in Minnesota. We are certainly concerned about workload or workforce, supply chains, with accuracy of the map. Remember, every state and territory will be in charge of deploying this at the same time, and so that's going to be a big thing for everybody to work through. And so some of the concerns that we have here. As far as timeline on the BEAD program, as I shared, our initial proposal was sent in December. We're working right now with NTIA of what I like to respectfully call a negotiation process. So they review our plan, come back, give us suggestions, go back and forth. Some of the things within the scope of the work within the plan are because of statutory language that I respect from the state here, and so we need some additional guidance. So working back and forth, also recognizing that this is Minnesota's plan and how to make sure that we are doing it in the most effective way that we can in Minnesota. The challenge process, I I would say this was an aggressive schedule when created. The challenge process will take up to 120 days, and we have not launched that yet, so it may get pushed because we can't start that until our volume 1 is all approved by NTIA. So I would say maybe closer to the April date. There'll be a 30-day challenge period. There'll be a 30-day challenge from the providers to say yes, no, and then we have up to 90 days as the state office to deduplicate, go through, and really finalize that snap in time and what those final maps will look like. Once that's all done and our volume 2 is approved, then we have 365 days to finalize our final proposal, which includes all of our sub-grantee selections. So I won't go through all of these slides, but just know that potentially we're not looking to start deployment until maybe 2025, early 2026, depending on when everything is approved. All right, with that, I'm just going to touch base a little bit on the Digital Equity Act. As a reminder, the state of Minnesota received $881,000 to do our plan. And so we did our plan over the past year. It was submitted, and now we are also in negotiations with NTIA to finalize that plan. And so there's a lot of unknowns with this right now, but we really are proud of the work that we did in this space. And think that this plan that we created really does mirror what Minnesota would like to see. And with that, I'll just touch base. What we created were digital connection committees across the state. These were self-guided committees. They would be nonprofits, faith groups, local units of government, libraries, immigrant populations that really were charged with assessing what they had in their communities, what are their barriers, and also what are things that would be very well mimicked and could be used across the state. And so really proud that we were able to create this capacity throughout the state. Those dots are just listening sessions, so we did 18 listening sessions as a small office across the state to get out and hear. And once we had all that information, we then put that into our digital opportunity plan. We didn't write a plan and then go in and make tweaks on it. We listened to what people in community said and adapted that into a plan that we think is really meaningful for the state. Just a couple things. Our vision statement really encompasses wrapping ourselves around that people want to be connected to each other, people want to be connected to opportunities, and people really want to be connected to options. And so that's where we heard from folks, and sort of, again, where we're moving forward, and hopefully a plan that is meaningful and useful to the state. All right, so in this plan, and if you read the plan, it is available on our website, is we tried to come up with examples of how once we get through the planning process and we receive our federal dollars for capacity, what do those capacity grants look like? So some of the things that came up were creating digital opportunity leaders networks. They could be curriculum and administering different grants for jobs in the repair technician world or technical support. It could also be formula grants for states and counties, because we know one barrier to access and to do this work is small communities don't always have that. So could we create some sort of block grant or capacity grants that were less competitive? And then also looking at ways that we can help reduce the cost of internet for low cost or for low income homes. So these are just examples. There's tons more online. What do we know now? Well, I don't know much right now. I hate to say it, except for our plan we're working on finalizing. And again, this is a robust plan. The team has worked really hard, and it's a really thoughtful plan. So going back and forth a little bit with NTIA to approve that. We do not know what our capacity dollar grants will be. We do not know when the notice of funding will be coming. I was at a conference last week where it was announced that the first state did get their plan approved, which was the state of Maine. My understanding by law, the NOFO has to be issued within 30 days. So we're hopeful we'll have some information soon. And finally, I have to just mention ACP program. We all have probably heard how important this is to the state of Minnesota. We currently have over 238 folks using it, of an eligibility of over almost 800,000 homes. All of this work is incredible, is necessary, but being able to access it and afford it is equally as important. So just want to put a plug in for that as well. Though this is a federal program, it will impact members of our communities. Oh, yeah, for those of you who are not aware, the Affordable Connectivity Plan provides a $30 voucher to homes. It goes, the internet service providers do it, the office doesn't do it. It's a federal program, up to $75 to support internet access in homes for our tribal communities. Yep, it's per month, sorry. Got a little bird in my ear here, sorry. Yes, it is a per month. And with that, I am certainly open to any questions. One thing I just want to mention is on March 12th at the Heritage Center here in the metro area, we will be celebrating 10 years of connecting One Minnesota to broadband, and encourage anybody to participate and share. It is a day to celebrate and reflect the work that has been done by many of you and many people before me. So encourage you to pass that along too. But open for questions.
Thank you, Secretary Director. The first question, Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Impressive amount of money both at the state and federal level. My question relates to how often does federal money or even the state money for building something, there are prevailing wage requirements. So just checking, are there prevailing wage requirements for installation of broadband?
Secretary Director.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, Representative. So within our BEAD plan, we did include, which is part of our scoring rubric, fair labor. As far as my understanding of broadband itself, the federal BEAD program does not require it. It is encouraged. Each state can do it. Broadband itself, prevailing wage only at this point in the state is when middle mile is involved. Otherwise, we have otherwise been exempt at the state level. As of right now, within the federal plans, again, it isn't a requirement. It is something that they would like us to look at, and we did utilize safety, training, and fair labor within the rubric of scoring any of our sub-grantees.
Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So in the plan, we did not put that Minnesota could require.
Secretary Director.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Thank you, Madam Chair, Representative. No, it is not it is not written in the plan as such.
Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And then final question. So when people are installing broadband, what's the background? Are they usually covered by a marketing unit, or is it just kind of an open call for people hiring? As part of that, when there's installation rig, is there records kept of if, let's say, there are other lines being hit, or other electrical lines or gas lines, or anything? Is there any record of incidents that are kept for during these installations? Is there impacts by the broadband installation?
Secretary Director.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Representative. So I think just to answer your question, so first, we are not regular. We work with our state partners when it comes to making sure that our providers and the consultants that they use and the teams that they use to do the install have the information. So certainly, try to be a connector when there are questions. But it does vary a little bit. We do have smaller providers across the state that may be unionized, may not be unionized, have in-sourced labor, and others that do not. When it comes to some of the big projects, they're generally not state funded. If they're already served. So in most cases, that's not something that we are, regulating, but if they would be in violation or something, would come up that is of concern, we definitely, in the next funding round, would take that into consideration and would be on our purview.
Representative Peterson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Couple of questions, to further explain a little bit on the line extension program. You mentioned that a line was being founded. As I recall, out in my rural, and then they found it right up to the edge of the house. Connected to it, so how close did the main line have to be before they would automatically go and connect the pole without having to utilize this program?
Secretary?
Thank you, Madam Chair, Representative. So it varies a little bit. So sometimes when a line extension is necessary, it may have been a previous homeowner chose not to be connected at the time that it was passed. Other times it may just be because at the time they were further along. So maybe they're a mile away from that connection or 2 mile, and that was a cost to the landowner to get it there that was just a barrier that they couldn't afford, or couldn't make do at that time. So it varies a little bit. Certainly when we get applications or bids from our provider, if it looks like a border-to-border application versus a line extension, you know, a clump of whatever it is, then we certainly wanna have conversations with the provider, because really this is to pick up those areas that have been left behind or just too far, to make the cost model.
Representative Anderson?
Thanks again, Madam Chair. Then one last question. If you could give me just a ballpark number. We all know what's happened to inflation the last 5 or 10 years. Do you have any kind of a figure that would tell us what inflation has done to the cost of laying in fiber cable 5 years ago compared to today or 10 years ago? What has inflation done to the cost?
Secretary?
Madam Chair, Representative, that is a really great question. I will tell you, right now, we do have an RFP out for cost data analysis for this very reason, because we do know that the dollars that we are receiving, both federally and at the state level, there are concerns of meeting, our statutory goals and getting to everybody. And so with this, RFP and hopefully, extensive, review, we'll have some solid numbers, for you before the end of the session.
Representative Jacob?
Thank you, Chair. So you just briefly raised across the words licensed fixed wireless services. So is this program providing funding for wireless services?
Secretary?
Madam Chair, Representative Jacob. So again, the office is agnostic when it comes to technology. We also know that, historically, wired service, has not been at the state level, fully served, but with NTIAs, with the BEAD dollars, licensed fixed wireless is reliable broadband service by definition. And so we also know that it's going to take probably all technology, to get to all the unserved locations. So we're gonna have to really rely on our providers working with us to, and our communities, what service do they want and need, and the best investment, to get to all the unserved locations and still stay within those dollar thresholds that require me, to be able to do so. So unfortunately, I don't have a good answer at this point, because it might be satellite in some locations if I can't get a provider to go there financially, with incentives or within the parameter, of the rules that we are, having to abide by.
Representative Jacob?
Yeah, well, as a follow-up. So in my district, obviously, really rugged terrain, and so it could be tower to tower, could be satellite, but the need is certainly there. So you're saying that potentially that's a possibility if you have a wider game in there.
Secretary?
Thank you, Madam Chair, Representative Jacobs. Yes, and as a person in your district that is on wireless, and have to go up, cut corn tassels off when my line of sight is not there. You know, we certainly want to make sure we are making long-term investments that are meaningful, that are buildable, and we can build off of for many years. So yes, these are all of concern to the office as we are looking forward in our plan.
Thank you. Representative Cincinnati?
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is kind of following up on something that you spoke of before, which is when you're installing and other lines get hit. I'm wondering if you all keep track of that, and can you speak a little bit to the process around that?
Executive Director?
Madam Chair, thank you, Representative, for the question. That is not something that we track, and are usually never, we're not made aware of. We're not the regulatory agency on there. Again, most of our providers, I mean, with grant dollars, they are in the communities and they want the utmost safety for their neighbors that they're serving. And so I don't track that information. It would only be hearsay.
Representative Cincinnati? Representative John?
I was kind of curious about the delivery of promised broadband. Like sometimes you promise 100 and then you probably don't get that. Who oversees that, and do you actually have numbers on the delivery of services?
Executive Director?
And Chair, Representative, so that is also, we are not the regulatory agency on there. And so it is not something that, you know, we have jurisdiction over. However, our maps online, we do have a modular to do speed tests. And we certainly work with landowners, residents, to make sure, they know what speeds are available and by who, when we can provide that technical assistance. One thing I will just say as we're negotiating with the BEAD dollars, that I did ask, NTIA to consider was the burden of proof be on the provider and not on the resident. And so, I'm not sure where that would land, but we are trying really hard, because we know that the speed tests that are required, to challenge are cumbersome and it's often confusing for our residents.
Representative John?
Do you know what state agency is responsible for that?
Executive Director?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, Representative, apologize, Commerce would be in charge of that.
Representative John? I just have a small question for the border grants and the low population density grants. I'm just question out what types of providers are applying for these? Are they generally large or small providers?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and really great question. So in Minnesota, we're really fortunate because we have all types of providers. We have our rural electric cooperatives that are serving their members that may otherwise not have service. We have our traditional internet service providers. We have our small telcos that once did our telephone service and stepped up because their members needed broadband. As we talked about, there are also satellite providers, as well as other wireless providers. So in Minnesota, we do really have options somewhat, as far as who we are able to work with and what those internet providers look like. There's also going to be municipalities as well.
Any further questions from members? Vice Chair Purcell.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Ms. Mackey. I believe we can get the presentation sent to us, but is there a website or someplace where those maps are more interactive so we can look at the fine detail and zoom in and look at the granular? Thank you.
Executive Director?
Yes, so thank you, Madam Chair and Representative. Yes, our website does have a pretty user-friendly map area. If I can use it, most people can. Little do you all know, I'm not as techy as I may appear in this role. But yes, it is very user-friendly. And as I said earlier, my team is always happy to get on the phone with any resident and walk through those maps and really identify. And we do that with the line extension. Every applicant we go through a process of reviewing, do they have service? Who do they have service with? Where could they get service? And connecting folks if it's available. If not, then obviously it moves into the bidding process within the line extension, but the maps are pretty user-friendly. Yeah. Yeah, the website is on there, and then the map, it just says maps and data behind that, so but happy to send it out, and yes, the slides will be made available.
Vice Chairperson. And the presentation are posted on the committee webpage. I see no further questions. Thank you so much for being here today.